In a quiet village on June 22nd, 2024, a very strange smell started coming from a large house in the middle of the hamlet. It wasn't a normal smell at all, more like rotten or burned meat, and it made the neighbors sniff the air and ask, "What is that?" One neighbor told his friend, "This smell isn't normal. We have to see what's going on." They went to knock on the door, but no one answered. The smell grew stronger, and the suspicions began to swell like a dark cloud. Finally, they called the family's relatives and forced the door open. What they found inside was a living nightmare. Chunks of flesh scattered everywhere, shattered and burned bones, dismembered parts, and dried blood on the floor. The women let out a scream that the whole village heard. The men stood stunned, and the children ran away in fear. Who did this? And how did this happen in a house that looked like paradise, in such a respectable family? That's what we'll uncover step by step in this video. So stay with me, because this story isn't just a crime. It's lessons about greed, madness, and justice that ultimately prevails. And before we start our story, don't forget to like and share the episode so it reaches as many people as possible. Catch me every Saturday, Monday, and Wednesday with a new episode. Without going into too many details, let's dive into the depths of our story. Peace be upon you, and welcome to a new episode. Our story begins in 2019 in Rustum Village, a small area filled with farmland and livestock. Most houses there were built from brick and mud, but this family's house was different. It was large, more than 2 floors, with a big barn for cattle beside it and wide land planted with wheat and corn. The father, a very respectable man, worked in the legal affairs department of the Directorate of Education in Kultur Center. He had control over everything. His name was well known in the area, people respected him, and he raised his children on respect. The family was well off, not rich like the wealthy, but living comfortably on his pension and their land. Every morning the father went to work, returned by sunset, sat with his children to tell them about law and life, and made them help in the field. But one ordinary day in 2019, while walking home through Rustum Village after work, he suffered a sudden heart attack, collapsed on the road, and died before anyone could get him to the hospital. The shock was huge. The whole village attended the funeral, and the family was devastated. From here, cracks began to appear in what seemed like a perfect picture. After the father's death in 2019, the mother, Betrayal Al-Sharqawi, who was in her 50s, carried the full responsibility. Betrayal was a strong rural woman, a housewife, but with a sharp mind like her husband. Every day she would wake up at dawn, put on her black galabaya, go check the crops in the field, bring clover for the cattle, return to prepare lunch, and then sit with the neighbors to talk about her days. She loved to say to the women, "May God bless my children, they are my whole life." The family consisted of 3 children. The eldest son, Muhammad Al-Sharqawi, about 24 years old at the time, a law graduate from Mansoura University, who had started working as a lawyer in a big office in Garbia Governorate. Outwardly, Muhammad seemed calm, always wearing a suit, going to court, then coming home to help his mother with the land. But inside him was a fire of jealousy and greed. Next was the sister, Amina Al-Sharqawi, around 18 years old, a beautiful girl like the moon. She was married to a man from a neighboring village, but due to family disputes, she divorced in 2020 and returned to live with her mother in Rustum Village, as is common in the countryside. Amina was quiet, helped her mother at home, cooked, fed the livestock, and dreamed of continuing her education, but circumstances kept her in the house. The youngest brother, Muhammad Al-Sharqawi, around 15 years old, was a cheerful boy, a student at a school in Qatar Center. In the first months after the father's death, the family remained united. Badria relied on her husband's pension and the land as their main sources of income. She would tell her children, "We'll continue together. God will open doors of abundance for us." Muhammad helped her with legal matters, going to settle land disputes with neighbors. Amina cooked for everyone. Mahmoud fetched vegetables from the field. But gradually, by late 2019 and early 2020, Badri began to think about distributing the inheritance to make things clear and avoid future problems. She gathered her children and told them in a calm but firm voice, "My children, this is God's law. The inheritance will be divided as he said. The male gets the share of 2 females. As for my share, I don't want it. I will distribute it among you." She divided the farmland, which was about 5 feddans, the big house, and the money in the bank fairly. Muhammad took his share as the eldest son, but he wanted more, claiming that since he was a lawyer and the protector of the family, he deserved everything. He raised his voice at his mother. "Mother, I'm the eldest. I will take everything. I won't let Mahmoud, the little one, get the same as me." Badriye replied, "My son, God has decreed it this way. There is no big or small in God's law." From that moment, the disputes began to grow. In 2020, the disputes began to show more clearly, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic that kept people at home more and increased the pressure. Muhammad started to withdraw and distance himself from the family. He took an apartment by himself on the upper floor of the house, which was empty, and stayed there alone. He ate alone in the kitchen, drank tea alone, and didn't speak to his mother or siblings unless he needed something. Badriye tried to calm things, getting up at dawn to go to the fields, coming back with food for him, saying, "Muhammad, come sit with us. We are one family." But he would answer coldly, "I know my right, and I won't let them take it." The neighbors in Rustam village began to hear some shouting from a distance, especially when Amina would step into the argument and tell her brother, "Brother, this is wrong. Mom has done her duty." But Muhammad felt extreme jealousy, especially toward Amina, who had returned divorced and needed support, and toward Mahmoud, who would receive his share without working as hard as Muhammad. At the end of 2020, Muhammad went to work at a large law firm in Tanta, the capital of Garbia Governorate, to put some distance between himself and the house, but the conflicts continued over the phone. He would call his mother and say, "This land is mine. I will plant it." At the start of 2021, that bad ambition began to turn into something dark inside Muhammad. He felt that his mother and siblings were the only obstacle to him controlling the whole inheritance. In the long nights alone in the apartment, he began watching YouTube and TikTok videos about family crimes, murder, and how to hide a body. Videos like how to dismember a body without a trace or ways to burn corpses in the countryside played in his head like poison. According to investigations that came out later, Muhammad memorized the steps and sketched plans on a small piece of paper in his desk drawer. First, buy sharp knives. Second, get an electric saw from the market in Qatar Center. Third, corrosive materials like caustic soda from the chemical shop in town. He thought about timing, telling himself, "Eid will be the best time. People will be busy and the smell will disappear in the heat." In the summer of 2021, he started to gather the tools gradually so no one would suspect. He went to the market in Qatar Center and bought 3 large knives, telling the seller, "These are for slaughtering in the barn." 2 weeks later, he bought a small electric saw, saying, "For the wood in the field." In autumn 2021, he bought a 20-liter jerry can of petrol from a nearby gas station and told the neighbor who helped him, "It's for the water pump." Badriye noticed that he was acting strangely, but she thought he was just stressed from work. In 2022, the conflicts reached a new peak. Muhammad was dismissed from the law firm in Tanta because of his bad behavior. He shouted at colleagues and was often absent because he kept returning to Rustam village to check the land. He went back to working in the field alone, irrigating the crops and hiring laborers, but his greed continued to grow. In June 2022, there was a big argument with his mother. He told her, "This whole land will be mine. I won't let Amina and Mahmoud take anything." Badri replied angrily, "My son, this is forbidden. God will punish you." Amina stepped in to defend her mother, saying, "Brother, you will not take our rights." Muhammad left angry, went to the apartment, and sat thinking more about the plan. In the following months, he began secretly testing the tools in the barn, cutting wood, seeing how to make the saw run quietly, and burning small pieces in a barrel to see the smell. He was writing notes in his phone like, "If I kill Badriye first, she'll be the easiest. Then Amina and Mahmoud will be scared and run." The devil took hold of him. By the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023, Muhammad Al-Sharqawi decided to expand his plan. He went to buy scented products and cleaning supplies from a supermarket in Kutur Center, telling himself, "These will cover the smell." He also got rubber gloves and large plastic bags to put the body parts in. In January 2023, another dispute broke out when Badri said she would sell a small part of the land to pay for Mahmoud's school expenses. Muhammad shouted, "You won't sell anything, it's mine." In the summer of 2023, he started learning from even more videos, like how to dissolve bones with caustic substances, and he bought caustic soda from a chemical shop in town. Badri noticed the tension and went to ask the neighbors about her son since she didn't see him much. The neighbors were the ones who often saw him working in the field. They told her, "He's just tired from work, Hajja." Mahmoud tried to get closer to his brother, but Muhammad responded to him coldly. At the beginning of 2024, the disputes reached a point of no return. A few days before Eid al-Fitr, in April 2024, a violent argument broke out. Badri said, "We will divide the rest of the inheritance after the holiday, according to God's law." Muhammad shouted, "You won't divide anything, I will take everything." At that moment, his mother became exhausted from his words and anger and fainted. But Muhammad left her and went out angrily, deciding that Eid would be the perfect time to carry out his plan. On the third day of Eid, June 18, 2024, he went to his neighbor who owned a tuk-tuk named Ahmed and told him, "Come, let's get supplies for the land." They rode the tuk-tuk to Kutur Center, bought strong cleaning agents, perfume, and an extra 20-liter jerry can of petrol. Ahmed asked, "What's all this for?" He said, "For the pump and cleaning." They returned, and Muhammad put the petrol in the barn. In the following 2 days, he was testing the saw on a chicken in the barn to see how to cut without much blood. The execution took place on Thursday, June 20th, 2024, at about 1 p.m. The sun was hot and the village was quiet because everyone was still on holiday. Badri was in the kitchen preparing lunch, Amina was helping her, and Mahmoud was playing in the yard. Muhammad suddenly entered, holding one of the knives he had prepared, his eyes red with rage. He went to his mother first, raised the knife, and struck her hard on the head. Badri fell to the floor and died within seconds. Amina heard the commotion and ran to the kitchen to see what was happening. Muhammad turned on her and stabbed her in the neck twice. She collapsed unconscious. Mahmoud came to see and shouted, "My mother is dying, brother." But Muhammad hit the boy in the chest and killed him instantly. He finished off the three of them in less than 2 minutes. Blood ran through the kitchen and the yard. Muhammad stood there for a few seconds, then went to wash his hands and told himself, "Okay, now it's time for the second part of the plan." After the killings, Muhammad carried out the second part of the plan with terrifying precision. He went to pray the Asr prayer at the nearby mosque in Rustam village so he would appear normal in front of people. He wore a clean galabeya and prayed like every day. He returned home at around 4 p.m., fetched the electric saw from the barn, and began cutting them into small pieces, about 20 to 30 pieces. Blood was flowing, but he wore gloves and put the remains into plastic bags. He put a large portion in the kitchen freezer to keep it cold, and the rest in the large yard, which was surrounded by high walls so no one could see. He threw small parts to the dog he kept in the barn. At 6 p.m., he went to pray Maghrib, then came back and continued cutting. Strangely, he later told investigators that he was eating sandwiches beside the bags and drinking water while committing the crime, as if nothing had happened. The next day, Friday, June 21, 2024, Muhammad continued with a normal routine to deceive the neighbors. In the morning, he went to Friday prayer at the mosque. Muhammad cried loudly while praying. People looked at him in surprise. One said, he must be upset about his disagreements with his mother. But inside he was fighting remorse, and the devil regained control. He returned home, gathered large parts in an old bag, walked along side roads, and dumped pieces in distant fields a few kilometers outside Rustam village. Around midday, the expected happened. The heat began to bring the smell out, so he fetched the petrol from the barn and set the remains on fire in an iron barrel in the yard. The fire flared and smoke rose. Neighbors smelled it and knocked on the door. One said, "It's trash. I burn it sometimes. I'm supposed to throw it in the drain, but I'm tired." He kept burning throughout the day, went to pray Isha, then came back to watch the fire and ate his dinner beside it. At night he brought a small amount of caustic soda, lye, poured it on the remaining bones which began to dissolve a little, but the smell grew worse. On Saturday, June 22, 2024, the smell became unbearable, like burnt and rotten meat. The neighbors grew more suspicious. One woman, Badri's neighbor, said, "Hajja Badri never stays in bed like this. Every day she comes out to get clover with me." Another neighbor said, "Amina used to visit us every 2 days, and Mahmoud played with my kids." They called the family's relatives. Muhammad's cousin, named Hassan, came with some men, broke down the door with an axe. They entered, the stench hit their faces, and they found the remains scattered. Hassan collapsed and fainted. The police arrived immediately, and forensic experts came to examine, but they couldn't identify everything because the heads were completely smashed with cleavers and the bones partially dissolved. Muhammad was outside buying more chemicals from the market. When he saw the crowd, he jumped and fled toward the farmlands. On June 26, 2024, after 4 days of intensive search, the police across Garbia Governorate mobilized, the security directorate, investigations, and even patrols in Kafr el-Sheikh. They found him hiding in a small apartment in Baltam City, wearing an old galabeya with his phone full of crime videos. He was arrested without resistance and transferred to the prosecution office in Kutur Center. In the initial investigations from June 27 to July 1, 2024, he confessed to everything, saying, "Greed for inheritance made me do this. I watched videos on the internet that taught me dismemberment and burning." He described the plan in detail. "I started planning in 2023, bought the tools gradually. On June 20th, I executed it, cut them into 25 pieces, burned most, threw away the rest." The public prosecution ordered 4 days of initial detention, later renewed for 15 days in July 2024, and requested a psychiatric report from the Mental Health Institute. The forensic department moved the remains to the morgue in Tanta, tried to piece together the bodies, but the heads were destroyed. They identified them through DNA from the bones, confirming they were Badrieh, 55 years, Amina, 23 years, and Mahmoud, 20 years. They also found additional parts in fields that Muhammad led them to during his confession. In August 2024, the investigations deepened. During interrogation with his lawyer, Muhammad claimed, "I am mentally ill, depressed from work." But the psychiatric evaluation stated, "He is not insane, and he is responsible for his actions." His detention was renewed for 45 days, and the case was referred to court in September 2024. The first session took place in December 2024 at the Montgomery Criminal Court. The victim's family attended. Badrieh's brother said, "We demand justice." Muhammad stood in the cage, eyes to the ground, confessing again. In January 2025, his lawyer requested a postponement for further psychiatric evaluation, and the court agreed. In April 2025, the investigations continued. The police found his notes on his phone, confirming he had been planning the crime for about a year. In May 2025, the El Mahala El Kubra Criminal Court, 4th Circuit, decided to refer the case to the Grand Mufti on May 11th for his opinion on the death sentence. The Mufti issued a fatwa for execution on May 20th. On June 12, 2025, the final ruling was announced: death by hanging for Muhammad Al-Sharqawi for premeditated murder, mutilation of corpses, and lying in wait. My friends, this story is a harsh lesson like a sword. Greed burns the soul, and family is more precious than any land. May God have mercy on Badrieh, Amina, and Mahmoud. And with that, today's episode ends. If this is your first time watching the channel, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell so you get all the updates. Stay tuned for the next episode. Goodbye.